Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM. I have an interesting guest for you tonight. Her name is Marianne Meed Ward. She's the mayor of Burlington. She was elected in the last election municipally. And in addition to being the mayor of Burlington, she's recently been elected to join the board of the large urban caucus of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO. Congratulations on that election, Mayor Ward.
Thank you so much. It was an acclamation, so it was the easiest election yet.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about what's it like governing during COVID-19. What's it been like in Burlington?
Well, it's been nonstop 24/7, I think, for everyone, certainly in our health sector, our frontline responders, and of course, elected leadership at all levels. It is, there's no manual for governing during a global pandemic. So so you're really having to talk and learn and listen and make sure that you're willing to pivot and change. If you try something that isn't quite right or that doesn't work, you got to be willing to admit that and move on and make changes. So it really is about agile leadership now. We hear that a lot in the business world, but now, government isn't known for moving quickly, but we have to as well. We have to be just as agile as the situation demands. So a lot of good learnings. I'm a silver lining person, but really it is something where we've had to listen and learn a lot from each other.
And have you been taking your lead primarily from the province, or has the region and or your city been different in regards to when it's been reopening and or closing, and what rules have been appropriate at different times?
We take our lead first and foremost from our medical officer of health here at Halton Region, and what the data is telling us around where our infection rates are. And Halton Region has, we're right next to Peel, and Peel is still very high in terms of the numbers of infection rates and spread and so forth. Halton has been relatively managed this very well, with some exceptions around long-term care. We all got hit with that, and unfortunately we had some outbreaks here in Halton too. But Burlington has actually had the lowest infection rate throughout the pandemic of any Golden Horseshoe GTA city. So our residents, kudos to our residents taking all the health precautions that they need to. But we were able to move into stage 3 and even stage 2 sooner than some of our partners because our numbers were low. So we are a little different. We're a bit of an oasis of calm here in the region and in Burlington.
So let's take the other tack then. Some people think we've overreacted. Do you think we've overreacted at all? If only long-term care has been impacted, did the rest of society really have to close down?
Well, our rates are low because of the measures that we've taken. We only have to look across the border to see what happens when there is no controls. The infection spreads like wildfire. We saw what happened in China. We saw what happened in Italy and in France. We saw what happened even in New York City in the early days. And our numbers were quite high in early March, right around the time that the emergency orders were issued by the province, the emergency declaration, and we were a couple of days after that. People had just come back from March break and travel, and if you still look back at the spike when our infection rates were higher, that's when they were highest. People came home, they went shopping, there was no mask bylaws anywhere, the physical distancing rules hadn't been put into place. People weren't taking the precautions that they have since then, and our numbers have steadily gone down.
I was down on your waterfront, don't remember exactly when, probably May, and the parking lots were all closed. Was that the right decision?
Absolutely.
Why?
We had playground equipment that was closed off, park benches that were closed off. We had no meaningful way to sanitize these things. We were trying to understand more about the virus, how it could be spread on surfaces. And we also wanted to send the message that the very best thing people could do in the early days of the pandemic was to stay home. Stay home, only go out for essential essential things, doctor's appointments, groceries, things of that nature. And really the message was stay home if you can do so. And because so many people in our community took that seriously and did that, and we closed parking lots to reinforce that message, so that they wouldn't be coming and congregating in parks, and then we would have an enforcement issue. They did stay home in large measure. And then we said, okay, we think we've gotten a hold of this, and now we can start to gradually reopen. But now we all understand what measures we have to take to keep ourselves and others safe, including the physical distancing bylaw that we implemented, including mask bylaw. So those weren't there in the early days. We needed to keep people separated until we could figure out what the best approach was.
And what have you done in the summertime to help some of the small businesses that have been suffering? Have you opened up extra room for them to open up patios and things like that?
Absolutely. We've let them take over our sidewalks and in some cases our roadways, especially in the downtown area. So there's a number of patios that are really outside of the restaurants. We did that very early. We waived the permit fees. We expedited the normal process that would have to, a rezoning process. We cut through all that so that they could get up and running. We also had a lot of restaurants in plazas and malls, strip malls, of that, things like that where we don't own the parking lots. So they had to work with their landlords. But again, what we did there is we cut the fees and we cut the permit processing time and said, if you have the okay from your landlord, you can go ahead and set up. And we, at last count, we had close to 40 across the city who had taken advantage of that.
What do you think is going to happen in the fall? Obviously, these patios have been, I think, critically important and helpful to the restaurants to make back some of the money that they clearly lost over the course of the spring and the early months of the COVID-19. But with cold weather, people aren't going to be wanting to sit outside anymore. Are you going to relax your experience inside?
We're Canadians. I think we'll be outside for a long time. We have had a long-standing patio program downtown Burlington, and it went right through till Thanksgiving. So we're hardy folk here in Canada, but we've done a couple of things to help our businesses. We are supporting the provincial federal initiative around the Main Street digital program to allow businesses to convert some of their business to online, and that affects restaurants too. They've been doing takeout and curbside pickup and all of that. So that's one thing, and we've added $125,000 of our own city money to that program. We also have just initiated a grant program for businesses for costs related to COVID. So plastic barriers, hand sanitizer, protective equipment. And again, we put aside $125,000 for businesses to apply to that. So we're trying to take the edge off. We made parking free for a very long time. We made transit free. We allowed people to defer their taxes without any penalty or interest. So when you add all of that up, it's close to $1 million of support and deferred revenue on the city side that we have said, look, you need to keep the money and you need some grants, so we're going to help you out.
What's the fallback from that? Are you going to have to increase property taxes next year, the year after, to pay back those extra dollars that you've made available?
We have reserve funds for that, so no, there won't be any impact on the tax base from those two particular programs. And like many municipalities, we have also received funding from the federal and provincial governments. So we were looking at about an $8 million shortfall at the end of this year, assuming business as usual in September. We know that's not going to happen, but we made our case to the federal and provincial governments, and we're getting $6 million in the first wave of funding. So that will help us a lot before we have to dip into reserves any further.
There was a interesting article in the Sunday New York Times yesterday about how Manhattanites don't want to live downtown Manhattan anymore and are vacating and going to the suburbs. Is that happening in Toronto? Are people moving to Burlington like crazy, leaving downtown Toronto?
Well, people have been leaving downtown Toronto for decades to come to the oasis that is Burlington, the #1 city in the country still. I used to live in Toronto for 10 years, and our family moved out in 2000. So I was probably one of the early waves, but that's been happening for a very long time. But the conversation that is happening now is about high density living. And that has been the push. It's been very controversial particularly in downtown Burlington, that people are starting to feel unsafe in very very large multi-residential units, and that I think is going to start having an impact on built form and how those units will be able to be sold, if at all. And we had to extend our mass bylaw into condos, residential as well as business condos, because people were just feeling, look, we have common elevator and laundry room and party room and hallways and lobby. I don't know who's coming and going, and we need those precautions there as well. So we did that extra step in Burlington.
It's interesting. I had Jennifer Keesmaat, former chief city planner in Toronto, on my show. And she said this perception about density is wrong. And it's interesting. And we went through a bunch of the statistics in regards to this, the incidence of the infection in the Greater Toronto Area. And it's not in high density buildings. It's in high occupancy family homes. So when you've got a whole bunch of people in one single dwelling, that's where the infection is the worst. In China and elsewhere, the statistics are 80% of the infections, other than what was in long-term care, came in the family homes. And when you had a family home with a whole bunch of people, the extended family with grandparents and whatnot living, that's when the infection is the worst. So it's interesting. It's not necessarily high density structures, but it's high occupancy homes.
Well, that data hasn't been done certainly in the Burlington situation, but it's actually validating the comment that high density and people in close proximity are what spreads the infection. We know that. So whether it's people living in a single household, if they are interacting with their friends and their neighbors and their workmates without keeping the proper precautions, with people in a hallway, with people in the lobby, without taking precautions, they're going to bring that back to their household. So it's large numbers of people in close proximity. Without taking the appropriate precautions of physical distancing, hand washing, mask wearing, and all of that. So wherever that occurs, you will start to see those numbers. So it is related to density. There's no question about it. When you look at the lowest numbers in Ontario, where is that? It's in cottage country, where what we would call a town hall of a couple thousand people is the entire population.
But it is interesting. In the condos downtown Toronto, they haven't had as high infections as Scarborough, North York, et cetera, where you've got single family dwellings, but single family dwellings with large occupancy. Anyway, it's interesting. You've undoubtedly seen some of the statistics of what happened in Israel when they reopened schools, what's happened in some of the southern states of the United States that have reopened colleges and high schools midway through August. Are you concerned about what's going to happen the next week or two in Burlington?
I think everyone is concerned. We're all watching very closely what happens in the schools, because that again is density. It's what we've been talking about. It's bringing a whole bunch of people together in a relatively confined space indoors. And I know the school boards, we have 4 in Burlington: public, Catholic, French, and English. And I know that they're trying to limit their numbers. And I know that there are people that will not be sending their kids into the classroom. And so that will help with the numbers. But we're all looking at how this is going to be done, because we can't risk another outbreak. We can't risk another spread. And yet you've got, kids from multiple different families. And so you talk about the social bubbles that we talked about earlier in this pandemic, where we were encouraging people to stay within their social circle. Well, when you go to school, you have this person's family and that person's family and all their networks and friends getting together. So I know everyone is trying. Teachers are trying. The school boards are trying. The province is trying. The federal government has injected some additional funding. All of that will help. Ultimately, it will require the students, the teachers, the families, the parents to do the right thing in terms of proper hygiene and not sending their kids to school if they're sick.
If we had a second wave, would you support another close down, or what's your attitude toward it?
Well, we'll take whatever measures we have to keep people safe. That is job number one. And it's interesting here in Burlington. We were one of the few regions that our hospital invested in a pandemic response unit on the property in case there was a surge in patients, and it never came because our residents did the right thing. We hope to never have to use that, but we are prepared if we have to. And that's the key is, most people who get COVID will recover on their own, but we need to have hospital capacity for those folks that require intensive care. And so we have that capacity. We have no patients in hospital right now. Knock on wood, we have 6 infections citywide. So we're doing all right. And I think that will help as kids go back to school, but we can't rest on our laurels, and we'll be watching those numbers daily, if not hourly.
What are you going to do in regards to your arenas, your community centers, your libraries, your other public facilities?
Well, all of those have been gradually reopened during parts of stage 2 as well as stage 3, and we've reduced our numbers like everyone else has to make sure that the physical distancing can be respected. So, our summer programming, for example, used to get thousands of kids through our summer camps. We have less than 500. We have cohorts of 10, including instructors. So significant reduction in numbers to keep people safe. We've opened community centers and arenas. We've had huge response. I just got the numbers the other day. 1,400 people in Burlington signing up for our fall programming, 200 on a wait list for programs. So people are ready to come back and participate in programs. We've sold most of our ice already. We've been open for swim lessons. So, but it's not, it's not the recreation program of pre-COVID. There's a lot more restrictions. It's by registration. You have to attest that to a number of things, that you're healthy, you haven't come into contact with somebody with COVID. There's hand sanitizer, there's masks where appropriate. So a lot of precautions over and above keeping the volume down have been taken by the city.
What's your own personal story? You, I understand, ran for ward council and were defeated. You ran for the Liberal Party at one point in time. You ran for council again and were elected. And then in the last election, you beat an incumbent, which is really difficult to do. Tell me why you got into politics and what sort of driven you.
Well, I got into politics for the same reason I got into journalism, which was my career pre-politics. I studied journalism and did that for 22 years. And the main reason was to help people make good decisions, give them good information, and give them a voice. And that really is what drove me into politics. The first run that I made was in 2006 against an incumbent. We had just recently moved to Burlington. My twins were 6 years old and my daughter was 8. So it was early in our family history. But what drove me in that election was my community didn't have good information about what was happening at City Hall, didn't feel they had a voice, didn't feel they could influence decisions. So I ran and came very close, but lost, came to the attention of every party actually in Burlington, and ended up running at that time because I was very supportive of the policies around education, protecting the Greenbelt, investing in healthcare. Ran against an incumbent that time, came very close, also lost within 3 votes a poll. But it actually solidified for me that it was something that I really wanted to do. And so the third time was the charm for me. I ran also against an incumbent and soundly defeated. So there were 4 of us on the ballot. I got well over 70% of the vote. So very decisive victory in that case. The next time round in 2014, I was the incumbent. I was reelected, and then in 2018 ran against an incumbent. So, my personal story is really about persistence. It's about not being discouraged or dissuaded by failure. If you know you're on the right path, keep trying. Took me 3 tries to get there, and not to be discouraged when people tell you an election's unwinnable. I've only ever run against incumbents, and I've defeated them twice. So it is possible if you have, a good platform, and if you, if people believe that you can deliver, and they did, and I have.
In 2007, you lost, as you said, by 3 votes per poll, 1,700 votes in total. It really sort of teaches you that every vote counts, I guess.
Absolutely.
what was that like personally, coming so close?
Oh, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to lose, because you don't put yourself on the ballot if you unless you believe you have something to contribute, unless you want to serve your community in that way. Uh, and so, you know, it's very heartbreaking. But I remember talking to my kids the day after both elections when I had lost. In the very first one, they didn't stay up for the vote count. They were too young. And, you know, the next day was a school day. We always have these elections on Mondays, typically. And they had to go to school and talk about the fact that their mom lost. And I talked to all of them before they went after both elections. And I reminded them of what the posters that are in their hallways. I was a volunteer in my kids' school for many years before I ran. So I saw the posters, and there's a big poster of a basketball net and a hockey net. And the saying is, and I don't know if it originated with Wayne Gretzky, but he certainly made it famous: you miss every shot you don't take. Wow. Don't be afraid of missing it. Take the shot. Put yourself out there. And I said, I'm not quitting. I'm not giving up. So losing doesn't feel great, but there are worse things than losing, and that's not trying at all. So I think you have an opportunity to teach them an important lesson that failure is not the end. Failure is the beginning of something else.
I got to know your predecessor, Rick Goldring, because I was chairman of something called the Western GTA Summit. Why did you run against him? How were your policies different? And why did you win?
Biggest difference was our approach to development in the city, broadly speaking, as well as the downtown. So he had voted, as had the rest of council, in favor of 20-plus story buildings in the city, in downtown Burlington and elsewhere, had approved developments that were well beyond what was required or contemplated in our official plan. We were in the process, as a city, had been for many years discussing a new official plan for the city and downtown. And I felt that the plan was overdevelopment, that it was taking the city in the wrong direction. It was especially going to destroy the character, the heritage, the community feel of downtown and turn it into a nondescript sea of high rises. And I thought we could do better. I thought that downtown is a fine ecosystem. It has single family homes beside townhomes, beside mid-rises, and it does already have some high rises. And if you add too much of one element, you really start to upset the mix that is downtown. And so that was the key. That was one of the key issues in the campaign, and the citizens likewise were not happy about the direction of the official plan. They were not happy with some of the votes that had been made. They felt they were tuned out. They were not heard. And I was the lone voice for, I will say, 8 years on that. Got outvoted 6-1 a lot. And finally, it was time to say, I think we need significant change. I think we need change on council. I'm gonna let my seat go to try and bring in a new voice. I need some reinforcements around the table. I think we need new leadership at the city. At the time, we had 2 council members retiring, so we knew that there would be an opportunity for some new voices to really bring a community perspective to development, and that's exactly what happened.
So were 3 or 4 new councillors elected then?
There were, 2 were defeated, 2 new ones. So only 1 out of 7 was returned. And then the mayor, of course, was defeated. So there were 3 incumbents that were defeated.
That's a massive turnover. Very
huge,
very unusual in municipal politics in Ontario. Did you run together as a sort of a slate or a party or a team?
We did not. I have in the past endorsed other candidates. This election, I chose not to, because you don't know who you're going to have to work with. And as the mayor, I wanted to make sure that I had good relationships with whoever the electorate sent to me. I certainly was aware and read all of the brochures. I think I met with just about every single person who was running in all the wards in the city. So they were close to, if you don't count the trustee elections, there was a lot of folks there as well. There were over 30 people on the ballot. So I did take the time to meet with them, talk to them, find out who they were, share my platform with them, obviously, but we did not run a slate and did not cross-endorse each other.
You're the first female mayor of Burlington since 1974, so 40, 50 years. Do you have a message?
Whole generation.
You have a message to any young women listening to us tonight?
consider running for elected office. We need more women in elected office. And, you know, it can be, it's been described in the past as a blood sport, and it doesn't need to be, and it in fact shouldn't be. It discourages people who don't want to be in a pugilist role, who simply want to make their community a better place, serve their community, do some good. It discourages people from getting involved. And the election, the last election, the 2018, was the nastiest in Burlington's history. Almost all of it targeted directly at me. So slander and rumors and negative ads and, you know, big bucks spent against me. And in fact, there's an outstanding court case for fraud for municipal spending for a numbered company and an individual that had sponsored negative ads against me. So it was a terrible election. And I talk to people about that, especially young women, and say, don't let it get you down. In fact, it backfired. People said, you know, I remember hearing this, if there are people trying to stop you so desperately, I got to check out who you are and see what you're about. And then when people would come and read my platform, many people said that they were persuaded to support me. So it doesn't ultimately work, but it doesn't, you know, make it a place that inspires people who just want to do good. So we need to clean up politics. That's one of my missions, but I certainly encourage young women to get involved. We need your voices.
Marianne Meed Ward, the Mayor of Burlington, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your thoughts on governance and COVID-19. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thanks.